Hello again! As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and we are here for yet another day at Spiceworks headquarters here in Austin, Texas. So Spiceworks is the company. They create the free network management software, the free community with like 5 million users. They have profiles, they have mobile device management software, so on and so forth. So this is a real successful startup company. So these folks just got a round E investment of about $57 million. They're well on their way to going to an IPO. They started about 8 years ago. They have 250 employees now. They're growing by 100 employees over the next year. They're planning to expand into another building. And so basically this is a company that has been very successful. It's still a startup. This is still It's still startup. It's still being funded through investment, but it is doing very, very well. So I was invited to come down here and basically talk with all of the folks to give you guys a better idea of what the real world of technology is like. And that's what I keep trying to emphasize to you guys is you really have to go out there into the real world to see what it's like. And there are different places, there are different environments, and we are seeing what it's like here. So we've talked to the CEO so far. We've talked to the VP of Development. We talked about their tech recruiting policies, and today I did an interview with Francis Sullivan, who is the CTO of Spiceworks. So he is the Chief Technology Officer. So I talked to him about what that actually means, and then also discussed with him their mobile device management software and why they decided to do the things that they decided to do with that software. So we're going to watch that in about a minute. Do realize that, again, as I say, probably the most important part of this show is the question and answer section of the show. That's where I answer your questions. So all you have to do is in all uppercase letters write question, colon, and then whatever your question is. Now, while I've been in Spiceworks, I have been having co-hosts the entire time, again, to give you guys a different viewpoint about how other people think about all of this stuff. And so today we are going to be having developers in here. So these are the actual, the DevOps staff, so development operation staff, to tell you what they think of things like the Ruby programming language, or which programming language should you start with first, or that kind of stuff. So we've had the IT people before. We've had Chris in here, which was the head of their IT department. We had Brian, I think it was yesterday, he was also part of the IT department. Today we'll have the development folks. So if you want to know, should you learn Python, or should you learn PHP, or should you learn PHP versus Java, or whatever, like I say, these are the folks. They actually get paid, as far as I understand, pretty good money off of this stuff. So they can give you that information. So with that, what I want to do is we will transition over, like I say, to the interview. It goes for about 34 minutes. Very good. We, again, sitting down, talking with the Chief Technology Officer, you can get a better idea of what real CTOs are like and what it will take to become one, if you in fact want to become one. So with that, let's go over to the interview, and I will leave you for a couple of minutes. So continuing my week here at Spiceworks, I'm going to be interviewing Francis Sullivan today. He is the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer here at Spiceworks. So we're going to be talking about his role in the CTO position, and then also their mobile device management software. So as you guys know, if you've listened to my videos for more than a week, you know, Spiceworks has the free network management software, the free community with 5 million users, the free profiles, but then they also have this this mobile device management software, which is interesting because it's the first one that kind of goes out of the completely free realm. So they do have a free version of it, but it's more freemium. So they have the free version and the pay-for version. So we'll talk about that, why that has a competitive advantage, and why you might be interested in it. Now, if you're interested in their mobile device management software, basically all you do is you do a Google search for Spiceworks MDM. I'm not sure, it doesn't really show up on the front page. But basically, if you do that, you'll come here and you'll see the mobile security and free mobile device management. You scroll down, you see all the the free features it has. You know, inventory your phones, monitor your devices, get more, blah 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 blah. If we go over, like I say, with their pricing scheme, they have the free version, which basically gives you like a lot of reporting options. And then if you actually go over to like the paid version for like $4.50 a month, let's say $4.50 a month, you actually get the ability to do manage your devices and manage security and all that kind of stuff. So this is one of the things we're really going to be talking about today with this interview. So let's flip over to camera 3, and like I say, we have Francis here, and let's kind of talk about like I say, the CTO and the mobile device management software. So when we talk about mobile device management software, what actually are we talking about?
So we're talking about the software that the device connects to it and like enables it to do things. So like if you have a device and you want, so like the problem with a mobile device is it's mobile. So I can take the mobile device, I can walk around with it,
yeah.
And I have an IT guy has no control over it once like I leave it somewhere, someone takes it.
Yeah.
So mobile device management gives you the ability to take back control of that phone, locate it,
yeah.
Lock it if it's lost, or wipe it if you really can't get it back.
So it seems like with the mobile device management software, really, it seems like it should just be the next generation of Active Directory. So I mean, the entire point of Active Directory is locking down desktop computers, locking down servers, locking down resources, blah, blah, blah. So if you think about mobile device management, you would just think that this would just be another component of Active Directory, and there really shouldn't be an opening for other software.
Right, so if Microsoft would have been more proactive in this, it probably would have been the case. So I think what happened was the mobile devices kind of crept up on Microsoft a little bit. So they actually have an MDM solution as well that fits with Active Directory.
Oh, do that. Okay.
But the proliferation of mobile devices, I think Scott gave a talk last year, like it's just asymptotic, the growth of mobile devices. Like they're just coming from everywhere. Everyone's got like 4 or 5 now. And 5 years ago, no one had any, right? So, so the fact that it's becoming a management problem is obvious because of so many are coming. And so many people expect to like be on their iPad and be able to get access to the same information that can't work.
Yeah.
So it is a real concern for an IT person trying to keep control of their network and what's going on and what's not. But I think Microsoft was just a little slow to adopt this idea of having to embrace mobile devices in the enterprise.
So, I mean, do you have any idea how much competition there is out there?
Oh yeah, there's literally 100 companies doing MDM.
Really?
Yeah.
So then what makes your MDM? Like, there's 100 people doing basically the same thing. That's usually when you decide not to do that.
Right.
So like, what's your competitive advantage?
So if you actually look at our inventory software that we provide, there's literally 1,000 people who do that, and they have different flavors of it. And what we were looking for, most of those are charge somebody a lot of money to manage your desktops or whatever.
Yeah.
When we started the company 8 years ago, the small medium business people couldn't afford heavy tax to pay for the software like that. So they were basically using Microsoft Word or Excel to manage their inventory. So we thought if we could give them software that would let them get a handle of their inventory to see what's on their network, that would be a huge advantage for them, right? Yeah. But we didn't go and do all the features that a premium inventory software solution would do. For one, we only had a couple of programmers write this, so it was impossible to do that much work. But the other thing is we were looking for something that was broadly applicable to most IT folks and less niche features. So when you come all the way up to mobile device management, that came out of nowhere. We were looking at how do we build the inventory version of that for free. So you basically have to get them on the phone and say that phone is part of my network. And, that part to do that would have taken maybe 10 or 15, maybe even 50 people years worth of work to do that work. And since there's hundreds of these companies out there, and since we have relationships with a lot of people, there were already several MDM vendors advertising on the Spiceworks network because they realized it was an up-and-coming problem.
Yeah.
We looked at ourselves, build versus, I'm going to say buy, we didn't buy it, but build versus let someone else do it.
Yeah.
And the way we were able to come up with this idea was that typically we don't do the managed part of the software. So like on the inventory side, we don't let you distribute software, or we don't do like things that a high-end shop would need. We don't do some of those things.
Okay.
So on the mobile side, like this deploy software to a mobile device, that's a great feature, but it's probably not as broadly applicable to everybody as it is just to get the device in your inventory and keep track of who has access to what. Yeah.
So then why? So because we've already talked to Scott Abel and Greg, and it seems like you guys were very, very proud of the free model, the basic, or the ad, not free, but the ad revenue model.
Yeah.
And so with this being more kind of a classical freemium model, now see, this seems to actually be kind of, a little bit stage left of what you were, going for.
That's interesting that you think that, because like when we started, we were like, okay, let's just build the free version of MDM, the parts that we could do, and like I said, it'd be a significant amount of work for us to do.
Yeah.
And we saw the market with hundreds of vendors, and we're like, what would we get done? Well, what we would have got done was about what we're giving away for free with the product. So in my mind, the free model, we were able to leverage our position in the network to get the free part and accelerate it into our users before we could have possibly built it. Yeah. And then the advanced stuff that not everyone needs, but several folks, I don't need it. Yeah. That was left for our partner to go ahead and do, because that's something we want to have been able to advantage to get to that point for several years.
Okay. So you partner with MAS 360
right.
and AAS 360.
FiberLink, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how does a partnership like that work? So you're kind of sticking your name on their product. I mean, do they actually sell this product and they're kind of selling you the white label version to resell, or do they somehow customize this for you guys?
No, so when we were looking at literally there is 100 people that do MDM, but we were looking at them. The first place we went to see who has a good reputation was our community. Okay. And FiberLink MAS 360 stood out as exemplary in our community. There was a couple others that we also looked at, and but in the end, when we went through all the features and everything we needed, they were the closest fit to what we were looking for.
How long does a relationship like that you contract out for generally? Like can they pull like next month if they wanted to?
Well, they were actually an advertiser, a vendor of ours for 2 years before we even attempted this idea. So it wasn't like they were Johnny come lately and we just jumped into something with that. So we had built up a relationship before, and it's interesting that they have since been bought by IBM.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw they were said by IBM. Or something.
So now we have a relationship with IBM, but the people that are there, they built the company over, I think it's a 20-year-old company. Yeah. So they're very easy to work with, and they have ideals that closely align with how we believe the company should be run.
Yeah. Interesting. So we start talking about MDM, so mobile device management, and then the dirty little secret, really, when we're talking about MDM, is we're talking about BYOD in a lot of ways. So MDM is mobile device management, managing iPhones or whatever. BYOD is bringing your own device, which kind of brings you into the sticky point where, so you have your employee come in with their iPad, and then you want to allow them to use your network, and then you're going to be managing it, but it's their $600 iPad that you now no longer have to pay. Do you guys, like when this kind of new technology comes out and there's so much gray area, do you offer guidance to anybody? Like, do you offer like best practices and that kind of stuff?
So we do our Spiceworld in Austin and a Spiceworld in London. Yeah. And even for the last 2 years, the BYOD session has been really hot. Yeah. Because of, there's a bunch of how do you draw the line? How do you really get control of the device, but let the person use the device for their own personal things as well. Yeah. And there's a lot of concerns there. I think some of it is still being worked out as we go. Yeah. But the bigger thing is people now expect to have access to data, that they have access to work wherever they are, and that mobile device is where it's showing up. Yeah. So if you don't manage it, you're just kind of putting your head in the sand. Yeah. And then now when you have a breach, you don't know what happened.
Do you see companies, like even when the employee has an iPad, giving them a second iPad with the mobile device management software on there, or are they trying to?
Well, I mean, you could do that. So I don't think using my personal iPad versus a company one, I don't think that's a big deal. As which one do I have access to? Yeah. So if I'm using my own personal one and I expect access to data, then that's where the problem comes in. Yeah. It's not I need 2 iPads because I go to the shelf and get out my business iPad versus not. It's like your own laptop, when you use it, you'll go check your sports team out and look at, you're using it for your personal use along the way as you're using it for professional use. And that's been a long story of locking down a laptop is how do how do you keep access to that? You get back to Active Directory, group policy, and things like that.
Yeah. So how do you see, because it's interesting with what Microsoft is trying to do with Windows 8, is basically they want to put Windows 8, the operating system, on everything. But then how does your mobile device management software deal with that? Is like a Surface that has Windows 8 considered a mobile device, or would that be considered Active Directory, or a combination of both?
Well, a combination of both. So I think the MDM software works on Windows 8 as well. So
okay.
Mass 360 is pushing forward their development to work on all of those significant mobile devices.
Okay. And I guess that's one of the questions when we start talking about significant. You know, you got Windows RT, you got BlackBerry. Do you guys care about those?
So I mean, interesting. I was talking about Spiceworks a minute ago. I think it was about 5 years ago. We had an audience of 300 IT folks. We asked them if they were interested in mobile software to help them with Spiceworks. So we ended up writing the Spiceworks mobile product. We're about to come out with a second version of that, which has push notification. We're pretty excited by that. But going back to that 5 years ago, we asked them, okay, so you want the mobile software, everyone wanted it, what device you want it on? And 98% of the audience said, I want it to run on a BlackBerry. Okay.
Really?
2 years later, we asked the same question, and there were 600 people in the audience, only one person that raised their hand for BlackBerry. So the rate of change of the type of device, like so you might be looking at Windows 8 right now devices that say that's never going to have significant market share. Well, just wait 2 years, because a mobile device is more disposable than any computer device that you've ever had before. So maybe a laptop would last 4 or 5 years. Like I trade my phone in every 2 years. Yeah.
So how do you, like, as a real company, so 250 employees, growing by 350, dealing with all these, where do you go? Like for me, my research is sitting down with news.google.com and going, oh, I think I'll buy that product. Or, you know, that's, like a company like yours, do you have internal research employees? Do you pay for research to try to figure out what's going on?
I think, like, depending on, like, if you're talking about, like, figuring out the next product to buy, our IT folks are kind of have their feet on the ground looking for the devices we have today, what are the problems, what are the devices out there. The vendors usually come in and show them what they like, but more and more, I'm not trying to shill our community, but more and more people go to a place like Spiceworks Community and interact with other IT folks and can kind of compare and contrast what's going on out there and what devices are there. So, and a lot of the vendors now have presence in our community as well, and they can help with that as well.
So then, so with the whole, say you're going from completely free to like this is freemium model, do you get concerned at all that will mess with your brand? Because like brand now is so like, people go, like it's the whole Twitterization of brands. Like they want to go and they want exactly what they want and they don't want anything kind of a little weird. And so like once you start putting money and prices in there, are you worried about that at all?
That's interesting, because the thing that I'm worried about, I'm always worried about our brand. I'm worried about are we doing the right thing for the user. So getting back to when we started the company, we made a subtle change when we started the company. We said we're not going to, it's not only, money isn't the end all be all. So the last company we were at, the sales deals kind of drove what development did. And in this case, we looked at the market and said, where can we add value? Once we add enough value and people start using it, I think we can figure out how a reasonable way to monetize it. But when you say monetize it, you need to watch what you were just talking about is you can't cross a line and like turn on your users and say, oh, this thing was just some sort of setup. But getting back to the MDM thing, so the free part that you get for free, I think is a full enough loaf of bread that you would say, wow, I can do a lot of things with Spiceworks that I couldn't do before, without having the premium group policy and lock and light the device.
Do you think you'll go ahead, like, do you think that's more how you guys will go with new product offerings?
Well, like in this case, it just made the build versus buy idea where our engineering effort to build that and try to keep working on making progress on the rest of our products was just, it was like an either or. So now we get to double dip and then also advantaging other brands in the market like Match 360. I think since they have been well received by our community, that it actually helps our karma a little bit, because we're bringing people a feature they couldn't get before for free. They're getting access to that. So before we did this, there was no free version of MDM for anybody. So since we've done this, there's several people now have to give it away for free, so you take a look at it. Yeah.
So then so you are CTO of Spiceworks, so Chief Technology Officer. So what does that actually mean in a company like Spiceworks? Like when people, because everybody talks about like the C-level executives and CTO, but what is that? Like what is your job?
Well, I mean, I have very specific technical. I'm in charge of everything technical, right? So, but I'm not really in there like telling everybody do this, do that. I'm kind of a backstop of making sure when I see things are going the right way or the wrong way, maybe nudging a little bit to get things back on track. But when we started, the four of us, I was the only guy writing code, so it was easy. So if we needed some code written, I would write it.
Yeah.
And then we added a couple people right away, and then our first release we did with three other programmers, and I did the whole thing in a few months. Yeah. So, but now I don't write all the code. I still write some code, but so my position right now, I'm focused on. I run the group called the Infrastructure Group, and we do scalability, security type features for the products across the board. So, like our community when we started, if you had more than a few hundred people on the site would croak. Now we have at any like tens of thousands of people at any instance are on the community all interacting, and that's so the scale of that to get it from where it was to there. My team did that, and we did it while it was all running too. So that was pretty neat. And then the other group I have is the mobile group. So it's involved with MDM and also with the Spiceworks mobile software as well.
Yeah. So do you still get your hands dirty with code?
Yeah, still write code.
No, really?
So just going back to my roots, I worked at places with several really smart people, but a couple folks I worked with. The funny thing is they both worked at the company I was at, Tandem, but they went over to Tivoli Software, and then I came over to Tivoli Software and I worked underneath them, Tom O'Brien, and they were actually the two technical co-founders of Motive, the last company I was at. But I learned a lot from them, and Tom especially said, if you stop coding, you'll lose your edge. So he said, whatever you do, make sure you at least code some so that everyone else doesn't look at you and say you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So one of the questions that now comes up, so the C-level executive names are just mushrooming. And so you're a CTO, but then you also heard of CIOs, and even now I've heard of, was it CDOs, I think Chief Development Officers, and that's supposed to take over the CDO or the CIO and the CTO position. So like, when you say CTO, did you just go, oh, I like that name? Does that functionally mean something?
I think when you start a company that's going to do software, you need a CTO. Right. So it's that easy. Yeah.
Okay.
But like I said, I was the first programmer. I was the first guy writing code. So it's like, it didn't matter if I was called developer or CTO. I still had to write the code. So as you grow a company and your company does well, like Spiceworks is doing well and continues to do well, that scope of that job becomes less about individual code and more about the overall aspects of the company. And so growing into that, so I wasn't groomed for that job. I just kind of grow into it. It's not wasn't a decision that says I want to run a company with. Yeah. Now other people can do it that way, so they go from place and get groomed to run hundreds of people. But I did it the other way. Yeah.
But would they just switch your name to CIO at some point? Like, say, is a CIO different than you?
Yeah, CIO is much different. So it's more focused on business outcomes and the data that drives the business.
Oh, okay.
So and then they're good at cutting through data, analyzing data, and telling you what it means. Now we do a lot of data on our side, but it's a different aspect of and back on my side, we focus on. We look at the data and said, how can we add more value? Because again, if we add value and people use our product, that's how we monetize it.
So would you guys bring on a CIO?
I think that's a natural evolution of a company as it gets bigger to get a CIO.
Okay.
The CDO, that sounds like a hybrid of VP of Dev and CTO.
Okay.
So you don't need Greg and I, you could just have one of us. Yeah.
So how does that work? So you got four co-founders, and so you got Scott, CEO, you're the CTO, then you have like Greg, who's then VP of development.
Right.
Did he just get the short straw on the names?
Greg. Oh, because he's not cheap. Yeah.
He's a yeah. He's not a.
I think VP is a pretty good name. Yeah. But like when we started, I'm sure Scott talked about or Greg talked about when we started, but the fact is the four of us worked together for several years before we started this company, and very similar roles at our last company. So we were already comfortable with each other. I don't think the titles really mean that much. As more as we just wanted to get together, build a company, and just have fun doing it.
So since you're CTO and he's a VP, like you don't get like 1.5 votes for every vote he gets.
No, he's more animate than me, so he gets more visible votes than I get.
He gets more visible.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I work behind the scenes and do the more gentle approach. Yeah.
So then, so you're a CTO then. So what makes you qualified to be CTO? Like why do you get that big title?
Well, the easiest way to get qualified for a big title is to start a company from scratch where you're the only technical guy. So then you can take whatever title you want that's technical.
Okay.
But the real answer to that question is you're never qualified for a job until you do the job for a long time. So I would say I'm qualified, but I'm still learning. And I think when I stop learning, that's going to be a sign for either I'm not having fun anymore or something else is going on. But the fact that we're growing and I'm having to grow into the role with it, I think that's the best you can hope for in a career. Yeah.
So do you have any special educational background? Is there something, like if you look at your educational background, you say that there's something that was good, like going to a specific college or specific degree program that was good for being a CTO?
Yeah, so like I went to the University of Arizona. I have a bachelor's degree in computer engineering, not computer science, and it was a great school, and I would highly recommend it. But I know there's several great schools. I would say, like going back to like my passion is building things. So my dad was a general contractor. I worked construction. I worked my way through college and high school, working construction, building things. I love building things. On the weekends, I build stuff. I'm always tinkering with something, but that passion to build things and to change something to make it better, that's really what drives me, and that's really important in the software world, because you're always tinkering, you're always looking for a better way. You're never finished. You get something out and you have 10 more ideas on make it better.
So you were at Motive before this?
Yeah, Motive.
And so by the time you were there, so did you go into that when it was still a startup or when it was more?
Yeah. I was employee number 11.
11.
Yeah.
So what's the decision to keep going in this side? Don't you get burned out after a little while then? I mean,
you get burned out. It takes incredible drive to work in the startup environment, and you get chewed up. So the really cool thing about working in a startup is you see something needs to be fixed, you can get access to it and do it.
Yeah.
And you don't really need to be qualified for it. You just need to say I want to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then you can learn how to do things better. But you have to be careful because it can chew you up and burn you out. I've had a lot of friends that have been burned out. Yeah. I just go back to, am I getting to build things, so I'm passionate about that, and then am I having fun? So if those two things are true, working hard is kind of the side effect of those, and not the, it's not work hard and those things come from, but it comes the other way. You end up working hard because you're having fun. Yeah.
So is there anything to be careful of though? Because I mean, one of the problems I say, being a technical person running around the startup community is the problem is we're so valuable. I mean, you have all the business co-founders, and they're a dime a dozen almost a lot of times. Yeah. But the technical people, everybody's going after them. So I mean, is there something like when you were looking at these startups, is there something specific where you said like that you were why you really believed in them, or is there something that you would be careful of going to be a?
Well, I think when I was looking at different, so I was at Motive for 8 years, so it wasn't like I was like jumping around. And then I was at Tivoli for 7 years before that. So I was at Tandem for 2 years, and several people from Tandem were very smart. Like I said, went over to Tivoli, and I followed them because I wanted to work with smart people. It was that simple. So like when Motive, I saw the core group of people that went to Motive were really smart. I said, wow, I want to work with those people. That's basically how the decision went down.
Really? Okay. So just
and then when Motive, when we were done with Motive, and it was being sold to Alcatel. I wanted to go do something else, and that's when I could sit down with Scott and Jay and Greg, and because they were out looking to do things, and then we kind of came together and decided to do this.
So, especially being the technical person, one of the things I warn my viewers a lot is that there's a difference between being intelligent and being smart. And so a lot of times geeks will try to outsmart themselves and end up screwing up because they see like the Wolf of Wall Street and they start to want to like, you know, trying to get options and trying to make money and try to wheel and deal, which usually isn't too good for a technical person because it's not really how the mind works. When you're going into these startup companies, do you look for like, because when you start talking about options, you start talking about equity, do you get legal advice, or where do you go to make sure that you know whatever you're getting is equitable, fair, etc.?
Well, so I have a different perspective on this so I have a lot of friends that have gone to places and worked for equity and come up with zero. So, so just having equity is not enough. It has to be, is it a fit for you? Yeah. If it's a fit for you and you're going to have fun doing it, the equity is nice, but it's almost like an afterthought. And then the way I can compartmentalize that is like, when I started off in construction in high school, I worked as a laborer. Those guys work hard. If you think that's an easy job, I mean, just because you don't need to use your mind, those guys work hard. Yeah. But they get paid minimum wage. Yeah. So like, I don't get paid minimum wage. I feel really lucky to be able to go to work and use my brain and do things that don't require like that hard of labor. So technical people think they have it hard, but if you look around at what other people have to deal with, we're actually quite lucky. So being blessed makes you think a little bit less about equity and more about I get to work. I have a unique opportunity to work on something and have fun doing it. Yeah.
And then, so as the company grows, so you were the fourth, or you were 4 people or whatever. Now you're at 250. Well, you're gonna get 100 in the next year probably, and it seems like you're growing at a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan? Like, because I mean, I guess that's one of the big questions with founders is when do the founders step down, or at least do they have metrics to know whether or not they're not keeping up with things? Have you guys figured that kind of thing out yet?
Oh, like what's my future?
Yeah, like so, if you go up to 1,000, are you here until you retire? Do you know once it gets past 2,000 employees, you know, it's just going to be too big for you?
Yeah, I mean, so if you said like 8 years ago, could you imagine you guys being at 250 in 8 years? I'd say no. Like when we started the company, we said it's not going to be more than 30 people because that's it. We don't really, we want a tight family. And, but like having success and getting success and learning from your success lets you kind of morph into a different role. I don't think I'll be here if we have 20,000 people, but I'm not saying never. You just never know. Just have to take it one day at a time. Yeah, but I don't have a master plan. I don't think about that because those type of things tend to take care of themselves as you learn and get committed to what you're doing. Yeah.
So for your position as a CTO, like when you guys get investment, because you guys just got $57 million investment, does that ever weigh on you, or do they ever come and pick at you to say that you need to start doing something differently? Or
we do less of the you need to do something differently and more of the we need to move the. We usually set goals for the company and then kind of from the goals says how do we get there, and then a lot of times that involves there's a big hole here and then one of us will say we want to do that.
And I guess final question then really is, so this morning there was just in the news or the blogosphere, I guess some coder for Microsoft just released or has been releasing just a foolish amount of code, and finally got arrested when he actually gave away like the code to the activations.
Yes.
What do you guys do, especially in like a software company like this? Do you have any particular products, or do you have any particular processes that you use to try to prevent or try to track code theft?
Well, we have processes in place, so the code, and then you sign a confidential agreement when you start. So like, if you get someone that's dishonest, they can definitely come in here and take the code. That's not a problem. But we don't try to hire dishonest people. So we try to hire people we trust, and then. I'm not saying that people couldn't make an honest mistake, but in this case, it doesn't sound like an honest mistake. It sounds like outright theft. And that guy will pay. So I mean, that's why we have a law system. So I'm I don't stay up at night worrying about that. I stay up at night worried about, did we make a mistake that's going to put our users or their data at risk? Okay. And then we're always looking to make sure, and then we look at vulnerabilities and say, what's the impact and what can we do to make sure that doesn't affect us? So see the thing like the target theft. Yeah. You're like, wow. Yeah, my son's credit card got stolen and they charged a bunch of stuff to it.
Yeah, wow. I guess that's one thing too, because you had Snowden talking at South by Southwest. Yeah. So being CTO, because he talks about, I love the sound by radicalizing the cryptographers. Has Snowden, the NSA, like from your CTO, CTO position, has that changed anything fundamental with how you're dealing? Has it changed anything at all with how you guys?
Well, I mean, just realizing that data, having access to data, can be good and bad, and then protecting it as best you can. I think those are the takeaways from that. But like the whole NSA, just watching everything do that, I mean, you could get pretty scared pretty fast. Thinking about all the possibilities of that.
But did you guys like recode anything or like anything specifically go, oh, we should SSL or I don't know, something?
Yeah, so we have SSL, we have security through our product, but like when we started, it was less of, it's a process over, like when we started, things like SSL were less of a concern, and today, like every site is like SSL.
So I guess that's really about all my questions. Do you have any? I ask everybody, like they have like their one golden nugget of wisdom you wish you would have known 20 years ago.
Golden nugget of wisdom. That's a good one. I think just the nugget would be make sure whatever you're doing, you're having fun, and make sure you're learning. So if you are doing those two things, kind of everything else follows from that.
Cool. Thank you for your time. And, so I guess that's really all my questions. Do you have? So there we go. That was the interview with Francis Sullivan. Like I said, I hope that was pretty good for you guys. You got to see how the chief technology officer is. Obviously, he was a little less verbose than some of the other folks, which is not a bad thing. But one of the main reasons that I'm doing these kind of interviews is to show you that there are different types of people. Obviously, the CEO of the company, he talked for 2 hours and 4 minutes. The VP of development talked for 1 hour and 20 minutes. The CTO talked for 33 minutes. It just shows you how that different people talk different amounts, but they are just as important for the company. So I do have some co-hosts today, but before I get to the co-hosts, I do have to make sure that I kiss up to my sponsors. So obviously, Spiceworks has paid for me to come out, and so we give them lots of applause. But I do have other sponsors, and I haven't exactly been giving them the best love this week. So just for a second, we need to go over and make sure that we talk about our sponsors for a second, and then we will get into the question and answer section. So again, as I've talked about before, Adaxes is one of our sponsors, ADAXES. If you're dealing with Active Directory on a large scale, they deal with Active Directory management and automation. So if you have to add a lot of users, disable a lot of users, screw around with a lot of different organizational units, Adaxes may be the option for you. Phoenix Contact. So Phoenix Contact manufactures industrial networking equipment. So if you're going to be putting networking equipment into explosive environments, into high electricity environments, these are the guys that manufacture that type of equipment. It's CL rated, UL rated, that type of thing. Then we have B&B Electronics. B&B Electronics, these are the folks that you would actually purchase the industrial networking equipment from. So if you're putting networking equipment into factories, into oil refineries, into industrial environments, you would take a look at a company like B&B Electronics to purchase that type of equipment. They do have a link to a white paper below this video on fiber optics if you're interested in that. Authenticate Silo. So Authenticate is the best solution so far for password management for software as a service. Basically, this is an overall infrastructure. This is not simply a plugin for Chrome or Firefox. You install an application locally to your computer that connects to their servers, encrypts the data in between. It's just a great overall amazing system. Really kind of complicated to explain, but if you're dealing with Twitter accounts, online bank accounts, any of that, if you share those accounts with different members of the organization, take a look at Authenticate Silo. I genuinely believe they've got the best solution solution I've seen so far. TotalSem, TOTALSEM, if you're looking to get your A+, your Net+, your Security Plus certification, they have video training, practice tests, exam vouchers, and more. Take a look at TotalSem.com. Nerds, we can fix that. If you are thinking about starting your own computer services company, but you don't want to deal with creating your logos and creating trademarks and creating copyrights and all that, they are a franchise system. So basically, you just buy into the franchise, and then away you go. Then you can start your own business. You use your trademark, their copyright, all of that kind of thing. Franchises are great for some people, horrible for others. So always make sure to do your due diligence. But if you are interested, you can just come to nerdswecanfixthat.com. Fill out the information or give them a call, and they would love to talk to you. Altaro, ALTARO. So if you are dealing with virtualization in the Hyper-V environment, so we're talking about Windows Server 2008 R2, Server 2012 or 2012 R2, you're trying to figure out a backup solution for virtualization, take a look at Altaro. They also have Backup FS. That might be a good option for you. Of course, they've got the free downloads and trials. Veeam, V-E-A-M. Again, if you're dealing with the virtualized world, if you're dealing with ESXi or Hyper-V, they have backup solutions for you. And of course, as you guys like, they have free stuff. So you guys always like the free stuff. And finally, yeah, okay, I know. We said Spiceworks a lot, but they're truly a sponsor. So again, we talked about it today. They've got the mobile device management software, they have the free network management software, they have the free community with 5 million users, they got the profiles and blah, blah, blah. They're a good company. They're sitting right beside me, kind of laughing at me, so blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. There we go. Blah, 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 blah. Oops, let's go to camera 3 then. Don't you love it when people start talking about the company? Like, yeah, you've heard this before.
They do some stuff.
They do some stuff. So I'm here with David and Ezra, who are part of the DevOps team, right? You're both part of the DevOps team.
Dev, I would say Dev proper, yeah.
Dev pro. Okay, what's the difference between DevOps and Dev proper?
Yeah, so I think the DevOps would be kind of a hybrid infrastructure function.
Okay.
We're supposed Dev, we're writing code. Yeah. We're not part of the deployment of that.
Oh, so you're not part of the deployment at all.
Right. I think it might be also in part because we work on more of the traditional software side, so the application that the IT pros are downloading to manage their network and to do the MDM and all those things.
Yeah.
We build that software. Francis, who you got the video with, he manages a DevOps team who's really more responsible not only for doing the performance and the infrastructure, but deploying and managing the data center and all the hosts and virtual hosts and all those things. So it's a little bit different roles, but I mean, we all work in software, so technicalities.
Exactly. So what code do you guys mostly write in then? Is there a mostly, or do you code in a zillion things?
That's different for different teams here. So my role now is more of a manager. So I'm not supposed to be writing code as much as I still write code, but I still write a fair amount of code. So most of our applications here are Ruby on Rails web apps, and so there's a lot of Ruby in there, a lot of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the typical things. Ezra works in some of that as well as...
Yeah, so I do a lot of network management, network discovery, inventory, things like that, and we end up using a lot of, so we deploy largely on Windows, and so the vast majority of our users are large Windows shops, so we end up using .NET because it's not full code out of that. And we still have, and that's just for different pieces of it, still we're largely a Ruby shop.
And you were saying, so Ruby, that's what I was surprised with. Ruby is now like administrator language or management language.
It's, we were talking before, and I think it's largely taken a foothold in DevOps specifically. Yeah. Things like Chef and Puppet are oftentimes, a lot of the core code is in Ruby. Okay. So I think sysadmins largely displaced Perl as the language for sysadmins.
Okay. It's been around for a long time. I think actually in some of that sysadmin capacity, I think only maybe in the past, how long has it been since Ruby on Rails? I think once Ruby on Rails came out, which was really like the app infrastructure on top of Ruby, did it really take off as sort of like a real viable alternative to other stacks for building web apps and stuff like that. And so now it's popular outside of that sort of core community for me, because Ruby itself is actually pretty old. But now it's way more popular for web developers to use.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about Puppet before. We talked about Chris. So what is Chef then?
It's an analogous. Basically. Configuration management for infrastructure. Yeah. So you can basically source control a lot of your configuration for infrastructure. So if you've got stacks of things like, think about what usually goes on a box: web server, database server, all the configuration, all the for Unix, all the etc kind of configuration. You can automate and deploy that. So Chef, Puppet, they both solve the same problem.
So why do you use Chef and Puppet then? Why not?
So first off, these are ops questions.
Come on.
We already talked to these guys. Man. I don't know the answer to why we're a Puppet shop versus a Chef shop. These are basically Vim versus Emacs or any two technologies. I don't know. It's not to start religious wars.
And then one thing we were talking about before, but just on air. So we talk about Ruby, and it's interesting with Ruby because everybody, it's like you almost just say by default Ruby on Rails. But on Rails is actually, in fact, a framework for Ruby. So are there any other frameworks for Ruby that people use, or is it basically just Ruby on Rails?
No, there's quite a few. I mean, especially in the past probably 4 or 5 years, something like that. People were, there's like Mercs and Asha. There's other app stacks that you can do on top of Ruby as a language. I don't know that we use many of them. We certainly don't. The group that we work with, and we don't. We're just pure Rails on top of Ruby. But I know there's other stuff out there.
And so the question, I know I'll get to this, or they'll ask this. So for you two, what would you say would be the best first programming language to learn?
I think that's a function of what you want to do. So if you want to go into more administrative systems level things, again, on the admin side, for me, things like shell scripting, PowerShell, and to some degree Ruby are where you can get your best bang for your buck. But in terms of coding, systems management sort of things, there's been a recent trend for people to pick up dynamic languages, JavaScript as a first language. If you're going to go into web dev, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I think that still on the systems management side, learning something, honestly, it's hard to beat and it's painful, but C and C++ and these kind of, once you get the fundamentals of memory management, going into a managed language is a lot, you kind of know what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is, learn a language that's hard first, potentially, and then you'll kind of understand what's happening.
Yeah, I think something along those lines, but it totally depends on where you want to go. If you're just like an IT guy and you want to learn some scripting and stuff like that, PowerShell, Ruby, shell scripting, work with any of those because there's no real. I don't think you have to learn like a lot of the concepts of like software development in order to just be effective at being a script guy and even writing pretty complex, decent scripts and reusable scripts. And you'll start to understand patterns and things like that over time. If you want to make a career in making software, then I think you start off with really understanding fundamentals and learning Java or C or one of these sorts of like really kind of lower level languages. And because it forces you to like learn. Like as we said, the memory management. I mean, just data structures, fundamental algorithms, and stuff like that. And also, some of the stuff that like Java forces you to do is like the decoration. What are the words that people when they sort of like when they're complaining about Java, they complain about Java.
Ceremony.
There's ceremony to like the definitions and the structure and the typing and all this business. I think some of that forces you to learn those things because in Ruby, like you can write Ruby well. That's actually one of the reasons that I like Ruby a lot is that. It's as for like a totally dynamic untyped language, it's really good at doing OO, and I come from like a real software development background where I totally believe in those sorts of things. But if you don't know any of that stuff and you start doing Ruby, I mean, you can do everything wrong in Ruby too, and like completely break all the rules, and it'll work. It'll be like totally unmaintainable, but it'll work. You can make it work. So I think somehow you have to learn some of that fundamental if that's what you want your career to be.
So I guess what I'm saying is not Perl.
Not Perl. Okay, not Perl. So that was one interesting thing that Greg was saying, your VP of development, was that Ruby developers were difficult to find. I guess A, would you agree with that, and B, why? That would not have been. That was actually kind of surprising.
I disagree with I think the way probably you're interpreting it. I think that they are hard to find only because the market is so hot for Ruby developers. I don't think that they're hard to find as like there's not many of them out there. I think Ezra and I previously worked at a company where we were a total .NET shop. And doing like ASP.NET, like web apps and stuff like that, and I think that's way harder to find, really decent candidates in. It's just a much smaller pool that you're going out to. I mean, we interview lots of people, we turn down lots of people here because they don't make the grade or whatever. And I remember when we worked together before, it was just finding quality people was that much harder. Here, it's harder just because everybody wants Ruby guys, friend guys.
Do you guys know like what's a 5-year Ruby developer make? Do you have any idea?
It's so market specific, man.
No,
I mean,
I just asked.
5-year Ruby developer?
Yeah, a couple
That's a
years. I
good
mean,
question.
like, what's the?
yeah, I don't know that.
I won't say because I don't. I'm a manager.
Yeah, I don't know if I did.
I'm not going to divulge.
Okay. That's one interesting thing here. Also, I mean, you guys, or at least all the managers I've talked to so far, are like nuts on community. Like to a point I've almost never seen it. Like a lot of companies talk about, we've got our community, our way of doing things. Does that go through all the way to the programmers?
You say community.
Our own community?
Culture?
I'm sorry, culture.
Oh,
Culture,
yeah.
The culture. Does that, because I'm used to programmers, usually a lot of times can be complete jackasses, and it's kind of overlooked because they're programmers. Is that?
Ooh. So I will say that potentially is one of the reasons that we don't hire people too. So this is, I mean, I'm sure Scott touched on it a little bit, and I'll give you my version of it too. So Scott's got this story of how he previously worked at companies or started companies, and really loved it in the beginning, and then in the end didn't like it as much. Ultimately, he leaves, whatever the story might be. I mean, I've gone through the same sorts of things. Maybe Ezra has as well. And I think you sort of reflect back on that, and what did you like about it in the beginning, what did you not like about it in the end, and you start to realize a lot of it was just the culture of the people that the behavior sort of is reflected in the culture of the people that you hired or that ended up working there in time. And so, and that's what contributed to like why it was such a negative experience by the end of that time there. And I think it's just really important. You can't like dictate culture in the sense that like I'm going to tell you that you should value this or you should value that. Culture is the collective makeup of the personalities that you've hired, right? So you have to control it through hiring and firing. So you have to be really vigilant when you're hiring people to say, this person I think does work with our culture. I could see myself working with this person. I could see myself like disagreeing with this person, but it not being like a healthy disagreement rather than like, you can get pretty ugly and stuff like that. And you'll come across, like back to your point, you'll come across developers that you really want to hire because they are like badasses in an interview.
Yeah.
But if they come across like total jerks and you just like recognize that, it's not worth it. I've learned through painful experience that it's just not worth it. And so, yeah, I think that part of it is we hire this culture, so that's why you see this culture, right? So we interview for this culture. The people that we end up with are this culture, and so.
On top of that, if you think about some of the stuff Greg was saying the other day about it being kind of making sure everybody's an adult and trust being how it's a large part of our tracking system, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to be able to trust these people that we hire.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's something that if you don't, it's going to come back to bite you.
So let us get us to some questions and see what the peanut gallery has to say. Apple or Android development? If you guys are going to be doing mobile, what would be your call?
Apple.
Apple?
Yeah.
Windows Phone, no. Yeah, it's hard.
Friend of mine posted, what are you thinking?
A
friend of mine posted on Facebook one day. I thought it was kind of a funny observation, and I totally agree with him. If you look at the top 10 grossing or free apps in the Apple App Store, they are productivity apps or games or whatever. And then if you look at the top few or top 10 or whatever in one of the Android stores, they're like all systems tools and monitoring functions. And you just realize, I think that there's a different audience, and if you want to go out and like create a business around solving a business problem or recognizing a market opportunity, go where I think you're going to find those people more. So that's why I would go for it.
My 11-year-old wants to write iOS games, so take a cue off of that.
Go for what
It's
the
the future.
11-year-olds. Which field of tech will offer more jobs in the future? Do you guys figure? Where do you guys figure I guess for programmers, where is the future? Because like with us, or with systems people, I guess it's like the whole Internet of Things and figuring out what the hell to do with all this data. As programmers, like what's the next step? You're on Ruby. Is it some weird? I don't know.
That stuff always evolves. I went to school and I learned a bunch of C and C++, and out of school I was doing Java, and here we're doing Ruby. I think that you learn the fundamentals, and it doesn't really the language. It takes only a little while to learn the syntax of any language, and it takes a little longer to kind of learn the idioms of the language and the best practice and how to write it well so it sustains or endures. But I mean, you can pick up another language; it's not a problem. I think there was a scare, you know, I don't know how many years ago it was, where people started outsourcing a lot more, and we started worrying that our jobs were disappearing. And then, like, after the dot-com bubble burst, you know, lots of kids didn't even, like, do CS in school and stuff like that. So I think there was actually a really recognizable dry spell in hiring for, like, there's a whole 4-year period or something like that where, like, kids weren't coming out of school with CS skills. I think all of that's passed. I think that we recognize that we have a lot of creativity in this country. I mean, it's certainly, we outsource here as well, but some of it doesn't mean you don't. I think that there's definitely always room for the creativity that I think America, in parts, kind of stands for, is trying to be inventive and stuff like that. And so if you are the type of person that has, like, a lot of energy and wants to come up with ideas and build products and stuff like that, and doing dev and being more like a product-focused developer, thinking about business problems, I think there's always opportunity for that.
But I mean, is there anything specific, like, you know, Puppet and Chef have become more prominent? Is there something like you look at and you're like, they're not using it now, but you could imagine in 3 years?
So I would take that up a level because, as David said, I mean, the trends come and go, right? Like, we've seen both languages, we've seen methodologies, we've seen OO to Agile to craftsmanship, now functional. I mean, these things come and go, right? And so chasing those, it's a good idea to say, bro. Some of the chasing is the wrong idea, right? Okay. So to me, fundamentals, you're always problem solving. I think that there's been, what we've seen recently is, you hear terms like data scientist, and you hear people say, well, what's a data scientist? It's someone that knows stats on a map, right? Yeah. But so actually knowing statistics and I think that that's going to continue to be more integral than we've seen before.
Okay.
So yeah, there's no single area of growth that I would focus on. I would say, to me, it's really the fundamentals, because you'll always be able to pick up, like David said, pick up a new language. Yeah. I mean, these are tools, right? They're means, not the end. So focus on the end.
Yeah, for the little kids that might be watching, I would say actually, yeah, learn more math, because they're going to be like, damn it. But for sure, because not just data scientists, I think everything now is more data driven. I mean, it's harder and harder to make decisions inside of a software company about where to invest. There's tons of choices out there. Yeah. Trying to prioritize the right one, you just can't go on a whim and just use your opinion. You go out and you talk to tons of users, and there's anecdotal evidence that way, but when you start building stuff, you want to collect a bunch of data on what's going on in the applications that you build, knowing, like, how to interpret that data or analyze that data or make decisions on that data. It doesn't mean you're a data scientist necessarily. Yeah. It just means you know how to, like, you know, understand numbers and work with numbers. And so I think there's a lot more math in this than I had anticipated. And I've got like half a math degree too, so still. Yeah.
All right. So how did you guys get to where you are today? What is how long have you been in the field? And what, the short version. The short-ish version. Wow.
I was one course away from getting an English degree, and thought that I was going to, I was always kind of veered towards kind of heavy on the syntax side. I thought I'd go into linguistics or natural language processing or something. Yeah. Found myself spending way too much time in computer lab, and had touched on some programming before, and thought this is really what I want to do. So wrapped up, did CS straight out of college. I was building PCs and playing with Linux the whole time. So financial software for a while, lots of enterprise stuff. Yeah, so 7 years of financial risk scoring, boarding.
So did you get a degree? So you're one credit off of
English and CS actually.
Wow.
Yes. Both sides of the brain, man.
How long did it take you to get that CS part?
It was about, I think it was an additional full year.
That's not bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so straight out of college into, it's kind of nice because I've been in small companies, but we've serviced Fortune 50 and 500 the first 10 years of me doing this. I've been doing this for 14 years now. Okay. And Spiceworks is a different game though, because in a lot of ways, a lot of the companies I've worked for before, large companies have quarterly goals, and you're chasing after giant sales, and your users are some large bank or some entity that's in a different state that you may have a representative for, that a product marketing person talks to you. Here, if I break something, I hear in the community quickly. Okay. If I have I'm really close to the people who are the users. Yeah. I can throw out ideas and get the validation directly from the users, and that's a huge. To me, that's one of the cool things about working here, that we have so many users. They're so local, and this is something that it really does simplify people's everyday, day-to-day tasks. Yeah. And if with wins, they'll celebrate it. They'll tell you what they love. Just, as a concrete example, if I want to start using a different version of .NET, I can go out there and ask how many people are planning to upgrade, what's the upgrade path, is this painful for you, get real user feedback. I don't have to route that back through a product manager. That's some levels of abstraction that a lot of the message gets lost in that communication. So I'm kind of roundabout answering that. But
let's see. How did I get into this? What took me here? Let's see. My dad's an English as a second language instructor is what he was doing after he left Vietnam, basically, and so long story. And anyway, so he went back to school to do CS because there's not a lot of money in teaching, and so he was getting his CS degree, and I was playing with the computer that he had at home when he was doing that, and that got me interested in doing it. So I kind of knew since like junior high that I wanted to do this, which is kind of the typical geek thing to say, and building PCs and all those sorts of things. And so I specifically chose college for doing CS, and I was doing CS the entire time I went there. And graduated from there, came back to Texas, worked at various companies in town, started working at startups, met the four founders at a company called Motive that they all knew each other from. And I was, I told somebody this story the other day, I was running with Greg 5-6 years ago, something like that. I'm running with him, and I'm totally bitching about the place where I was working at the time, which is not the way that I would recommend anybody try and get a job. But I'm just griping about where I'm working, what's broken with that environment or something. And he said, well, I think that we're going to start ramping up, and so we started talking about me working here, and I thought it was a cool opportunity and different language, and a lot of the things that Ezra said about like how we interact with our users and the chance to do that is a little bit unique to us, in especially in the B2B space. I think it's a little bit more popular in the consumer space, but it's a little bit unique to us and certainly different from what I had done in the past, and so I was pretty excited about that, so I took the gig and enjoyed it since.
So is there anything like unique you guys did that was like I don't know, that catapulted your career, or like you did a boot camp, or I don't know, you went on a sabbatical, or...
Definitely none of those.
No.
No, I mean, I think that it's been just like I think anyone else's career path. There's been losses and wins, and some of the wins have been big, and some of the losses have hurt.
Yeah.
So no, I mean, there's no magic bullet, right? There's experience, there's learning from it, and there's continuing to try to reflect on the experience, do better next time, figure out what you like, what worked and what didn't. So I don't really have any single point that was like no epiphany.
No, like magical pill stuff, no. I think that part of it is why I think we were chosen for this culture is that I have a tremendous amount of passion for the thing that I do here and for building software, and if anything, that's probably what's taken me more. I'm tireless at trying to make it better.
I am a software developer, and I want to know how I should figure out the price of my software. You guys are around programmers. I mean, I always say, will you buy it for $10? How about 20? But
no, there's actually a lot of that. If you aren't talking to your users or your potential customers, then you need to be, and get out there and say, how much would you pay for this, and kind of get them to put their money where their mouth is.
So I think that's it, because I think he's asked like the same thing like 3 times. And it's just like, go out and ask, like, you want to buy this product? Will you buy it for 20? How about 10? How about 5? Okay, 5. You know, I don't know.
I guess there's a little school of thought these days that is don't like go for the freemium model. So Spiceworks isn't a freemium model; we're a free model, right? We make money differently. But the rule of thought is if the product's worth paying for, then charge them for it. Charge them from the get-go. And in some ways, I think that there's maybe something that we could have learned, and so if you're considering doing like the free versus paid version, something that I don't think you think about this going into it, but in some ways, if we actually charge for our software, we potentially might have more vocal users in a sense. I mean, which is hard to think about because we have a lot of vocal users and a lot of users in general. But it's so what Greg and I sort of call like skin in the game. So like if I didn't pay for the software that I'm trying, it's sort of like when you try an app on your phone or something like that. If it doesn't work for you, or you don't understand it or whatever, guess what? You didn't put anything into installing this. It's just as easy to delete. And so you'll see a lot of people that install Spiceworks, and they will go through a little bit of it, and they decide that they couldn't figure it out, or it didn't quite solve the problem that they were looking for, or whatever, and that's it, you know. And so, but if you're charging for software, then you'll find out that your people they put a little bit of money into it.
Yeah.
Your customers will actually try to use it a little bit more, and so it's sort of a different way of thinking about why you might want to charge. I don't know. I'd say just get out there and say, how much would you pay for this?
Exactly. Yes, you have to know who you're selling to and know your audience. I mean, it really depends. Are you selling up market? Is it something that's, you know, is it a system utility that people are using, or is it an add-on? I mean, it totally depends on what you're building to.
Yeah.
I will say that there's anecdotally the Salvation Army and the free donuts, or I can't quote exactly, but starting to charge for something that previously was free is high friction.
Yes. So that's some advice, and I have a feeling for the person who is asking this, I think you want a specific answer that nobody can give you. I think
$10.
Exactly. $17.99.
There you go. $17.99. You got it from a real programmer. Let's see. What programming language should I start with? My school has taught me VB.net, but now I want to learn real programming. How is Visual? Visual Basic used to be pretty decent. How do you guys see it nowadays? He's just nodding his head.
Pass. I've never done any VB.
We maintained a small amount of VB at the company where we worked at previously. It was a little rough.
That's right.
What I found is a funny sort of anecdote I remember about working on VB.net is that it was so counterintuitive to me and I'm sure that's because I grew up doing C++ and Java and stuff like that, but it was so counterintuitive, almost to the point that it broke the way that I thought. So you're like trying to solve a problem in VB, and the language kept on getting into the way to where you had to like sort of solve problems in the VB way rather than like how you would normally architect software. So it skewed everything to, I would say, to the wrong. And so I mean, it's great that you're doing something technical. So I'm not going to take anything away from that. I mean, VB.net is still a programming language, and so like Ezra said earlier, a lot of this is just. I call it like when I tell my wife, it's like working with puzzles all day long. You're just solving problems and you're dealing with puzzles all day long. And so there's elements to be learned in any language. Next language I would use, Java or C# or something like that is probably the most widely used languages out there for jobs, or honestly Ruby. If you want to do if you like doing web stuff, then just learn JavaScript and HTML.
Right. I would say also, just if you're trying to broaden your horizons a little bit and just learn something different. I mean, if you want to, the fastest path to productivity is probably going to be C# coming from VB.net. You're still on the same platform, you know the same libraries. There's not that big of a jump. You're in the same editor, etc. But if you want it to expand your horizons a little bit, pick up a dynamic language. Pick up something that you're not used to. Try out Ruby or Python. Play with. I mean, if you're on the CLR for VB.net already, play with F# a little bit if you want to play with functional language.
What exactly is F#? I haven't really heard of F#.
F# is a hybrid functional OO language that runs in the CLR. Did we just lose like 12 viewers?
You just hit Ezra's pet project.
What
do people program in F#?
So what is functional languages, especially hybrid functional languages, are typically, I shouldn't say especially, they're typically, you see them in academia and a lot of kind of quantitative analytics stuff.
Okay.
And so you're seeing them kind of bleed over a little bit more now into systems programming, especially the hybrid side of that. They're still fairly niche languages. Scala on the Java side, it's kind of the analog of the Java side. So, you don't want me to get me started.
Don't get started. Okay.
I would say, let me go back and revise my answer. I would say Ruby or Python or something like that, and also some sort of web framework. I think the thing that keeps people engaged in learning is like seeing positive feedback, like making progress, seeing that you're actually building something. You go through any of the Ruby tutorials or pick one of your Python web stacks or something like that and go through one of its tutorials. The fact that you feel like you're actually building something, you'll feel like pretty energized and cool about that, and you'll continue to stay involved in it. If you go off into something like Java where it's hard to see progress quickly, even though I think you learn good fundamentals or something like Java, I think that the chances are you might just sort of lose interest. And so maybe pick something that's more positive reinforcement.
Kind of to say that another way, build something that you can see progress on. So if you have an itch, so if there's something that you need to automate, I mean, obviously it's a little bit contrived to say this, but either go through a tutorial that walks you through a complete project, or find something you've been wanting to do anyway, a problem you've been wanting to solve, and learn the new language in the context of that. Solve a problem, produce something, instead of just going through and maybe reading a book from front to back and learning the full syntax without really knowing how to use it.
So with app development, I guess one of the questions he's asking, will app development increase in coming years? I guess my question would be to kind of take it, is you have this whole question between web app development and native app development. As programmers, from your point of view, do you think it's going more native, more web? Who the hell knows? Split the baby.
I'd say more web still. Although there are like platforms like mobile, and then I think you're seeing more niche platform networks. I mean, we were sort of building one ourselves. We're going to be able to build apps on top of the Spiceworks platform. There's stuff like, Salesforce has a platform for you to kind of build and distribute apps. So lots of, there's, go to developers.whateverdomain.com and you'll probably find that they've got some sort of API in some way of like producing apps and distributing them on that applications platform. So there's that kind of thing. A lot of those are web development apps, though, in some form or fashion. Then there's like mobile apps. I would say if it's not mobile, it's web.
I mean, do you guys notice? I guess that was the argument about a year or two ago, where that native apps are just fundamentally faster than web apps, especially for like smartphones and devices. Now that things have gotten more powerful, is it still better to create a native app versus a web app?
I don't have a ton of experience with the whole native versus mobile. I know that after, I guess, Facebook announced that they made their app native again.
Yeah.
The guys that make that JavaScript framework, whatever, they put out like a sort of a Facebook-y app built completely on mobile, and it did a lot of the things that the Facebook app itself could do. I didn't think it worked quite as well, but I think it worked pretty impressively well. And it's something that you wouldn't look at and say, wow, I can't believe that they built that in HTML. So I don't know. I think that if you can build something that sophisticated in HTML, you will have no problem. I mean, in JavaScript, you will have no problem getting a job, because people that are that good at it are hard to find.
I guess that's one of the questions too, since everyone wants to know what computers do you guys use? Do you PC, Mac, Ubuntu?
I'm Ubuntu VM. Actually, I'm kind of this Frankensteinian Debian Ubuntu hand-rolled, as long as weird crap is in my path, VM for Linux stuff. And I've got a Mac that kind of my VM host.
VM host.
So I use it about 30% of the time. I'm largely PC, but that's because we're deploying on Windows. Yeah. So I'm using what we're deploying.
I'm a Mac guy now. Yeah. Yeah, no. I had a PC. Well, this is kind of funny. I when I first got here, I had a Mac kind of like yours right here. Yeah. The 15-inch MacBook Pro, and they had it decked out for me, and I was doing a bunch of like Windows development, and to where one day I realized I was booted in through boot camp into Windows, like running on the hardware rather than like in a VM. I was in boot camp for like 6 months straight. When I finally went to Chris and I was like, listen man, I just need a PC. And so he gave me this PC that was totally decked out, and for like half the cost or whatever, and I used that for a while, and then became more of a manager, started doing more traveling, recruiting and events and stuff like that, and I was lugging around this PC that I swear to God weighed so much, and to where I went back to Chris, I'm like, listen man, I need something lighter, so now I have an Air, so I'm one of those guys, so I like my Air, I think it's a good box.
Awesome.
So how relevant is math in day-to-day tasks? You were saying math is important, but in day-to-day?
I'll let Ezra answer that one first, because I think that I actually do use it a fair amount, but I'll let Ezra.
No, I think I use it a fair amount too. I think that there's understanding, there's just knowing what's happening behind the scenes and understanding the effect. We talk about what the performance and performance of some of our code is. I mean, it's good to know this stuff intuitively without having to find out later. I'm not doing a lot of number crunching per se. I think there's a lot of libraries and there's a lot of abstraction away. A lot of that's abstracted away from the day-to-day.
Okay.
I think that not having to go refresh, if there's something I need to refresh, I can. Yeah, if that answers that or not.
You're not doing like matrix algebra day-to-day or anything like that. I would say, if you're building like the first version of your product or something like that, you're starting from scratch, I don't think you're probably going to use a ton of math in that. But I think once you're operating a business, there's a lot of just day-to-day looking at what's going on, understanding what might be affecting the business, and so you're looking, and that's just simple math. But it's just every day you're doing some of it. And I would say that I'm doing a little bit of it every week.
So like simple math or like trigonometry? And
no.
It's econometrics here.
No, but I mean, if you're monitoring the usage of your application, understanding the install funnels and things like that. I mean, you're just looking at, and then you deploy a change to, like last week we had a change, or a couple weeks ago we had a change go out how the install flow of our app works, and it negatively affected stuff. And in order to find out like where the drop off was, I mean, you're running constantly, you're running queries, you're looking at numbers, you're calculating averages, and so. Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount of it that you probably do on a regular basis. It's simple math, like I say. If you're doing like the, recommendation engine style, this, because you shopped on for this item or you looked at this item, you should be looking at that. It's like that's the kind of thing that doesn't happen very often. Yeah. That's more your data scientist sort of role, I think. But I would say there's some amount of simple math in every day.
Let's see here. Great question. Probably a simple question. What's the best way to get started in Ruby? Let's grab a book.
No, do the tutorial. It's a really simple language.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think going through the tutorial, and maybe it takes a while to understand idiomatic syntax of any language, but try to port something that if you already have some code. Yeah. Especially, so for me, learning a new language, I try to make that my, just kind of replace a lot of the stuff I do in shell. Okay. Find files, find replace, make myself go through the process of starting to think the way that language helps you think. And so trivial tasks, I'll make myself write a bunch of just little utilities in that if I'm trying to learn.
If you're in the job market, get one of those, or probably browse online for one of those books that's like interview questions. I was reading over the shoulder of somebody on a plane one time, and he had like this book of like 1,000 interview questions. Yeah, because you come in for a tech interview, we ask you to basically write code on the board, and we're not looking for perfect syntax or anything like that, but you have to be able to like solve a problem on the board. So I think in order to not have it be abstract and I'm just glossing over and falling asleep as I'm reading a chapter on how to write a loop in Ruby or something like that, like look in one of these books and like look at one of the problems and say, okay, I want to solve this in Ruby, and then you'll end up like consulting the reference probably more than the guide in order to just learn how to do it. And so at least it gets a somewhat concrete. And plus, if you're getting practice at doing these sort of like interview type questions, then you'll probably do better in your interviews.
So there's actually books.
I saw one at least. I never knew this until I saw one on this guy reading one on the plane. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But it gave me an idea for an interview question. As I was reading over the shoulder, going, that's pretty good.
That's cool. Okay. So you've seen these?
Yeah, I've seen it. Actually, there's sites that have, I forget the name of the, there's a pretty famous site with increasingly more difficult interview questions that you go through. And there's some that there's like basically math problems you can do in different languages. I actually don't know if I would recommend, if you're learning a new language, going to that, because I've tried it before and I found myself like worrying about actually like figuring out the problem and not worrying about the syntax itself. Yeah. So find, you can do both. If you're playing an interview and you're already pretty proficient, I think it makes sense. If you're just now kind of getting into programming and you're trying to learn, there's fundamentals there. You can solve simpler tasks and learn the syntax before you go in deep.
Would learning computer architecture make you a better programmer?
Yes.
Yep. It depends. I mean, certainly if you're going to go and work and any closer to the hardware. The company I was at before this, so in school I hated EE and the computer engineering classes, and they just, because I've been a math and software guy for as long as I can remember, and so they just didn't make sense to me. And 2 companies ago we were working together, and we're working on a bunch of .NET code and doing similar stuff to what we do here, just like systems management type stuff. And I left that company because I wanted to go in I wanted to go and work on something manly, I called it. And so I went to work for a hardware company. Software guy at a hardware company, different exercise. But it was kind of cool working with a bunch of guys that know like how to put together a board and bring it up, and then you're programming like the firmware for different chips on the board and stuff like that. There was interesting challenges to it all, but I think that the cool thing for me was sort of meeting those guys and then getting a little bit of like the whiteboard education from those guys, like explaining to me different buses and traces and all these sorts of things that I didn't pay attention to in school, basically. And so, I think especially if you want to go anywhere near that kind of stuff in your career.
I don't have much more to say on that. Yes, I think that it's especially in the most managed languages are running on a virtual machine anyway today. I don't mean like a virtual machine like Hyper-V or ESX. We've got a VM that approximates or abstracts the CPU away from you.
Okay.
And so it's a good idea to at least know or be able to recall when you need to what's happening. There are times you need to dive deep. Hopefully not frequently, otherwise you probably are not solving real business problems. But
Yeah.
How did you pay for college education? Any great thoughts there?
Loans and scholarships.
Alright, let me see. Does Spiceworks give job interviews in random rooms like these?
Not this room, but not with dinosaurs behind you. But yeah, we've got a handful of rooms around the building that we do our interviews in. They all have a whiteboard.
Yeah.
There's one behind the cameras over here. I can't remember what this used to be.
I don't know.
So how many interviews? So they're talking about you go through an insane number of interviews to make sure you're part of the culture. Like, how many interviews did you guys go through to get in there?
Well, I started pretty early on, so I don't, quite honestly, I think I maybe had like all of 3, but I was like, in the 30s and I knew all the guys here beforehand. Nowadays, you go through about 9, would be my guess.
Depending what you're applying for. I would say 6 to 9.
Yeah.
I think that 2 on-sites is not uncommon, depending on...
Yeah, 2 visits to the office. Yeah.
So is there any way to completely bomb it? Like, because you say obviously that's fit with the culture. So is there something just stupid that they could do to bomb it?
Oh yeah.
That they don't.
Oh, yeah.
That they don't mean like they're not actually jackasses. They just do something dumb that day. Is there anything?
Culturally, you mean?
Yeah. We're just like done.
I think like someone who comes in being either extremely, we like ownership. When we say that, we mean we want people to care and be passionate about what they're building.
Yeah.
And all the way through and carry through their product. But I don't want somebody who is as a fiefdom who won't let other people into their code. This is mine. There are people I've met that were had their own private source control. Put it that way.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So those are big red flags. Yeah, there's a laundry list of things like that that are cultural red flags.
Yeah, I mean, just to give away one thing that I would try to do in an interview is sort of push you to the point of saying, I don't know. There's lots, and other people will probably do it as well, that you're trying to see if the person will just say, I don't know, because it's a hard thing to do in an interview, to admit that you don't know how to do something, and maybe to guess, and it'd be good to guess, don't just walk up and say, I don't know. But at the same time, don't be that guy that, of course, this is another conversation. Don't be that guy that pretends to know when he really doesn't know, because that's one of the things that you're looking for. And worse, if I'm trying to explain to you how it works, and when you give me the wrong answer and then you disagree with me, that's probably a deal killer right there.
Say, I don't know. So we were talking about this before, about females, the programming here. At your point of view, a 30-year-old female in the field. Of course, it's been a bunch of white guys have been interviewing. But do you guys have any thoughts on...
Exactly, you want to narrow that down?
So if a 30-year-old female is trying to get into programming, is there anything that...
Same thing's a 30-year-old male, right? Like it's the exact same. We interview. We have the women developers here too.
Yeah.
I don't know the numbers offhand. It feels like it's a little bit higher representation than what I can kind of anecdotally say industry-wise.
Yeah.
I think we've got overall we're intentionally diverse.
Yeah.
There's obviously there's kind of people can be assholes. There's sexism, racism, ageism.
Yeah.
We avoid those people back to culture. We don't want to, you don't want to work with those kind of people.
Yeah.
So, same requirements. Same thing we do to a 30-year-old male.
So is there any red flag? I mean, like a big thing, like when I've been talking to other people, they've been saying, when you interview, it's as important that you're interviewing the company as you're being interviewed.
Yeah.
In your experience, has there been any good red flags? Like you sat down with an interview and then they were a jackass, and you're like, is there anything like when you sit down that especially a new person may not realize is a massive red flag? Like you probably don't want to work for this company.
I've got one. When the company has this notion that everybody should. There's no question that people are always going to want to work for them infinitely. There's no notion that they're in a competing market for talent. To me, that's not gonna scale. So if there's a company that's, if you ask them what's your recruiting strategy, tell me a little bit more about your growth plans, and they're just they haven't even thought about it. People are the infinite line of people wanting to work for us. Yeah. To me, that's something that tells me it's quite short-sighted, and yeah, that's not.
That's a good answer. I haven't thought. That's a really good question. I haven't thought about that. Sort of like, what would be the red flag as the interviewer? Man, that's a good one. I think, man, I would just be looking at sort of the passion of the person that's interviewing you, and ask them. Yeah, that's a really hard question.
So this is kind of software specific, but I tend to veer away from companies who are chronically rewriting their entire stack. Okay. And I've seen, when talking to companies that are they're constantly, either via acquisition or something else, they have a bunch of different pieces to different projects, and they're constantly trying to unify their code base, which is fine. It's a good thing to do. But if that's what they've been doing for the past 4 years, that's a problem for me. And there are some companies who aren't focused. They're more focused on, or the managers and the dev team is more focused on the technology and the product itself. So those are some red flags for me.
So is there anything like once you guys, since you guys have been in the field for a while, like once you actually got in the door that you found was intolerable, that again, I don't know, they didn't have ping pong tables. I don't know what it is with programmers. As an IT guy, it drives me nuts.
Foosball table.
Ping pong tables and foosball. I don't, like I say, as IT guys, we never get that stuff. I don't. But is there something like that? Like you got in, it was like, this is going to be an awesome job, and then you get in there, and it's kind of like that, just that itch. You're like, I don't know why this irritates the hell out of me, but this really pisses me off. Is there anything like that?
I guess I just haven't worked at enough sucky companies. I don't know. I think the one thing that I think is a little bit interesting is sort of an interesting observation is that, reflecting on a couple of companies that I didn't enjoy working for, was that the teams, the dev teams at the companies that were sort of dysfunctional were also the best dev teams I've ever worked with. And I think that those two things are related. I think companies that are not well managed, or not really clear business goals, or whatever it is that from the ranks you would decide that this company's not going in the right direction or whatever, those companies probably either fail outright, or they manage to succeed sort of despite themselves, probably because of the people that are still working there. And so I've worked at companies where I thoroughly enjoyed my coworkers and the product that we were building and stuff like that, but ultimately the companies failed for other reasons. I don't know. So in some ways, maybe I'm just not thinking, maybe there are people that really do care that they've got a foosball table or espresso machine or something like that. Maybe if there was no coffee, I'd be like, oh my God, I can't work here.
I would say that it's actually a good thing when people bring in and kind of, once you've encountered good developers, you keep those people in your network and you hope to work with them again. You know people you don't want in that crew, right? Yeah. And so I think it's a great thing when I go to a shop and there's a bunch of people who worked together before, not solely there, but kind of everyone's gone out and picked people back up. I think that's good. I think that can be difficult to if you're coming out of band, if you're a new person, I think it's going to be difficult to integrate with things that are people who've known each other for 10 years for a long time. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just people forget that, there's kind of an in-group. And it's obviously, ideally, you wouldn't have it be exclusive. You'd have to be accepting of people. But I've had situations where it took a long time to kind of make inroads and, prove yourself or whatever it happens to be.
I would say don't let that stop you, though, because I had a friend that actually didn't want to come work here because a lot of us had worked together in the past, and he felt like he would never be able to sort of crack into the clique or whatever he thought it was going to be, and I just, in some ways, I think with that attitude, it's a little bit like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right, that you're not going to be able to. So I think just sort of almost, don't be like the oblivious guy that's not self-aware and right. What'd you guys do this weekend? When you're not, one of their friends or whatever. I'm just joking, but yeah, I don't know. I would just say, I wouldn't let that stop you, but I know what you're saying. I know that's hard.
Just to clarify, that didn't stop me, and I'm glad it didn't, because I'm working with people today still from improvement.
Yeah.
But it is something that can be difficult when you come in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
and I've seen teams before that were intentionally, like the situations I've encountered were unintentionally exclusive.
Yeah.
And I've seen things were intentionally exclusive. So if it's the kind of situation where they're not accepting new members,
Yeah.
right, then that could be better.
Let's see here. Just a question. How is your company structured in terms of teams and hierarchy? Or I guess at least for you guys in programming. What's
Pretty loose. So Greg probably didn't mention this, but he's fully willing to repeat it. He doesn't like a whole lot of structure. It's a pretty flat organization under Greg.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's not a hierarchy at all. But I would say that we organize into project-based teams, and usually 3 to 6 people per team working on projects. And you can shift among the projects from sort of release to release. That's perfectly allowed. In our company, we are kind of 3 to 6 person teams working, but then those teams are within kind of the larger applications that we develop. And so there's the app that the IT pros download, and then there's the community, and there's also people that are sort of representing the vendors. And they work on some community stuff as well as some other products. And so kind of within those larger orgs, then I guess there's also Francis's team that works on infrastructure. So the 4 larger teams, they kind of have sub-teams within them, and people move between those sub-teams. You rarely see, though it's not out of the question, you rarely see people crossing the bigger teams. But that's fine too. I would just say that the usual answer that I have to that is, I call it sort of like guerrilla development, in that, there's people that come out of a meeting room, sort of, and we are setting kind of what is the strategy for the company going forward, what are the goals that we have to hit in this year and stuff like that. But we're not really dictating, there's no product managers in the sense that we're dictating some spec of what we have to build this year. We go back to the teams, we're like, here's the challenge, how are we going to meet this challenge? So it's not only the, how do we build something, but it's like the what are we going to do that I think is a little bit unique to Spiceworks. And I think a testament to like the culture that Ezra mentioned, like ownership and trust, is that, in some ways we don't have a lot of process because we trust people to all be adults here and kind of own the problem, and we leverage that. And so honestly, I'm a manager now. I don't write down hardly anything. I've never written a spec.
I mean, there's no playbook for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies, and this isn't really a value judgment. Some people really like highly prescriptive, a lot of specs, a lot of SRTs and PRDs, that sort of thing. I think that we get a lot more innovation by not having that kind of overhead for, it is kind of a value judgment, I guess. But,
no value judgment, except for the...
I mean, some people like it. I mean, I've met people that were very productive but needed a lot more definition, a lot more structure.
Yeah.
But this kind of goes back to, I don't remember who was saying this, which one of the interviewers, I don't know if it was Greg or I think it was Greg. He was saying one of the things we want to do is we want developers to justify their features, and by ensuring that they know people are going to use them, measuring that, and figuring out, are we wasting time here? Or, if you've got something you're working on, and you've got some new change you want to make, or some new modification, or whatever it happens to be, figure out if that's going to be, as a company, do we need to be spending cycles on that or not? And I think that rather than it kind of coming down off the mount, and then everyone just kind of loses accountability if it said, well, that's what the spec said, I'm done, whether or not it worked or not, or there was no usage or whatever. We care about that, so I think that we talked a little bit about ownership, it kind of trickles down.
So if you have a pretty flat hierarchy, I mean, there's a whole thing of, let's say you want to make $10,000 more next year,
okay,
and you want to work for it. I mean, it's not like just give me 10,000. If you don't really have a hierarchy, do you know, like, how do you get promoted or raise it? Like, is there some kind of structure to that? Because like normally you go, oh, I know if I get to your position, I get X more money. Like, if it's pretty flat, how do you at least?
Well, I mean, there's the one thing that I would say that we have written down is we do have sort of a title system, and so I wouldn't say it's a hierarchy necessarily, like as in a reporting structure.
Yeah.
But there's developer, there's senior developer, staff developer. There's some titles in here. And we don't often talk about what are the salary bands amongst those titles, but yeah, but we talk about when we're giving people reviews and stuff like that. You are talking about like what does it take to be that next level? Like what are the things that you have to do or exhibit through your actions to make it to that next level? And you'll just see that the people that are ambitious and they want that. They have to exhibit that behavior. So. that answers.
So if you guys, like talking to Scott at some point, I guess you guys are on track for IPO and the whatever, will like this flat hierarchy, I mean they talk about like once you go from a private company to public company, things change. Do you think anything would change with that pretty flat hierarchy?
I actually think it has to change somewhat. I think some of this, and I would say this to Greg's face as well, I mean some of this is really Greg's reluctance, and we all jokingly say that it's Greg's reluctance as well, but I think in order to scale, you can't continue to have, we saw that in our sales team last year, I mean you can't continue to have, 20-something, 30-something people basically reporting to Greg. I mean, so now we have a hierarchy in the sense that I'm a manager and 6, 7, whatever people report to me, and there's other managers, so there's 5 people with my title, but then there's people that aren't even a manager, they have people sort of reporting to them, and so I mean we have sort of broken up some of the load that was on Greg, and so, but I don't know that it's going to end up being too deep where like there's people that report to Greg and then there's people that report to those people and then there's people that report, I don't know that it'll end up being like that kind of thing. Back to your question, I mean, I think though, I don't know that it necessarily has to do anything with IPO. I think IPO is largely, it affects, being a public company mostly, I think affects sort of like the openness of information inside of your company as well as like a lot of the finance side of it in terms of like how you report and all those sorts of things. I think from our perspective, it doesn't change a ton of what we do. I think our goal still is the outcomes that we try to produce to the products we build, so it doesn't really change that.
Cool. What type of background do your UI UX designers have? Do they have pure design backgrounds or are they crossover techies?
Most of them used to write device drivers.
They are primarily visual designers, so we've tried a bunch, and this is a really hard one to hire for because I think our product is technically complicated. So it's a hard thing to take something like, I mean, you know IT, it's a hard thing to try and take something like IT that's normally really dry, full of charts and lines and stuff like that. And one, make it fun, and two, make it still convey the right bits of information and kind of hide the stuff that doesn't matter all the time. Right? So trying to make it simple and more approachable and stuff like that, I think that's a really hard thing to do. And I think what we have found is it's really kind of hard for any designer to grasp it. And so if you like hire a UX designer that normally does a lot of like user studies and stuff like that, you're asking them to get so much domain knowledge into IT that it's almost not worth it. And so what we found instead is, what seems to work for us anyway, I'm not saying that any of this is like the way that it has to be, but what works for us is we hire people that are really good visual designers, and we kind of have to pair them with the people that know the domain more. So people like me and Ezra who have done more systems type stuff than your average person here, that we can understand the IT side of it a little bit better, and we will sit down and look at the designs that the designers will make and sort of like point out like, yeah, but the important thing here isn't the fact that it's like we're working on this monitoring thing now, it's the fact is not that it's like that the CPU is at 80%, like if it's always at 80%, it's not the end of the world, but what if it spikes? Then you're trying to convey things like this that the guy's never going to understand if you like just give him like a UX research role. So I think that we hire for visual design. I would say normally I would be going for a UX type person to do more of the experience type stuff and really think through that, the whole product. But also I think you have to have good visual design sense too. So I will entertain a conversation with any UX person, but I always start off with where's your portfolio, because if you're not willing to like work in Photoshop or whatever app you want to use, kind of all day long, it's just not going to work here. But that doesn't, certainly every company is totally different. So a lot of the stuff that we're saying, by the way, that's how it works here. That's how it works at maybe some of the companies that we've worked at in the past. It's totally our opinion, but as Francis would say, just because it's what we're doing doesn't mean it's right. There's lots of ways to do things, and this is just what we've learned.
Well, the company like this, I mean, since you have so much of the pretty software, like how many UI, UX people do you have, do you figure?
Well, we have, on the software side, we have 6 designers. And, but then like front-end developers, guys that can take that design from like a mock-up to basically product, that's a lot. That's a lot of people.
Well, that's a lot, but you have 6 people that just figure out how to make it look pretty.
That's right.
I think that's about right. Yeah. 5 or 6.
Okay. What is the most ambitious project you're working on now?
Can't talk about it.
That's ironically though. What's the most ambitious project you've done? Like, what out of what Spiceworks has done has been like really like? Is there anything that's just I don't know, added something to the field of technology?
To the field of technology.
Like nobody else had done it before, not
Well,
the way that you did it.
Well, so I mean, Spiceworks in general. So if you look at 2005 when Spiceworks is starting, 2006 when Spiceworks is starting, you're going into a space where IT pros are typically used to spending money to get the products that they use to manage their network. This is before a lot of the free tools and things this is before SolarWinds, right? And so, which I use SolarWinds as sort of the example of like the first company that sort of took enterprise software and made it inside sales and sold it for the cost of a laptop or whatever it cost in the beginning. And so Spiceworks was sort of doing the math on could we, and this is before my time as well, but could we do it for cheap, and how cheap could we do it, and try to do these IT management tools for cheap, and really start to realize if we're going to play around in the commodity space, then maybe we just cut to the chase and make it free. And so I think that's the fundamental thing that was totally different was taking a product that IT pros are normally used to spending money on and making it totally free and saying it's going to be free to you guys, we'll figure out a different way to make money, and then making that sustainable. And since then you see other companies that do the same thing. So there's Practice Fusion, there's Wave Accounting, there's other companies out there. I mean, even GitHub to some degree, they provide tools to the developer community that normally that they were either cobbling together in house or purchasing things like code management systems and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the one thing
you've done, like with the network infrastructure. I don't know.
So we actually try, I think mostly what we do a lot of, especially on the app side, it's a lot of commodity stuff, but we try to make it easier. And I think that's where the innovation is. We try to make it more accessible. We try to help people who you don't have to know how to configure VLANs to go see what's actually on, how busy the switch is, things like that. So, there's innovation, but I think the innovation is more about accessibility.
Yeah, it's always innovation in the business model that enables us to sort of keep it simple. I told a story to a user not too long ago that was, imagine if I'm coming up with a software company now and I'm going to go and build this product and decide that I'm going to build this new thing, whatever it is, and it's going to compete in a market that has tons and tons of products out there, right? And so kind of the space that we're in. And so if I'm starting off a company and I'm going to compete in this space, the first version of the product that I'm going to go and build is going to be half as feature rich as anything that's out there, right? And so as a result, I'm probably going to go and charge half as much. It goes back to your question about how much should I charge. And so I go out there and let's say that the average is $30 a server a year or something like that. I'm going to go out there and say, well, I don't have all those features. I'm going to charge $10 or $15 a server a year. And then a typical software company would go out there, they'd sell a few, or they'd go and get a couple of pilots going or something like that with some potential customers. And then maybe they'd find somebody with a lot of experience, and the guy with a lot of experience would say, well, yeah, it's pretty cheap, and I can see that I'd save some overhead by using this product, but it's just not feature rich enough for me. And somebody else that's sort of brand new to doing IT, he would say, yeah, this is pretty good for me. So the SEs or whatever, the sales staff, they would kind of take that information, they'd go back to the product team, usually, because this is what we've seen in the past, they go back to the product team. It was like what Ezra was mentioning, like sort of like you're always chasing after who's going to pay the bills in a way. They would go back to the product team and they would say, well, so I think that if we added this feature and this feature, then we could sell it for a little bit more and we'll make more money, right? And that's how this conversation always happens, right? And so then the next step is like the product team either decides, and this is like fundamental to the business, which way you want to do this. I decided I'm going to continue to charge very little and make it up in volume, if you want to call it that, and stay at this sort of commodity level, which there's an interesting caveat there, and then, or I'm going to go up market, I'm going to add a couple more features, I'm going to charge a little bit more money, I'm going to make some more revenue. Most companies will do the second option there, right? And I think because if you look at the first option, let's say that I continue to charge $15 a month a server or whatever it is, or a year a server, whatever. Well, then that in time, somebody else is going to come along and charge 10 and charge 5. And then pretty much you're looking at like, well, how can I continue to sustain my business when I'm only making $5 a server a year? And so then you start adding features or something. So anyway, Spiceworks figured out a totally different business model to where we can give away the software for free and just make up the money differently. So I think that's why we can continue to make it just be simple software. So going back to the story that I told the user, so those two people come in, they try the different products. One guy decides that it's not for him. He's going to use some other more sophisticated software, or whatever it is, that maybe he has to pay a little bit more, but he gets the features that he needs. Other guy, he continues to use this software. It works for him for a while. He uses Spiceworks for a while. At some point, the guy that's content to use the simpler stuff, he outgrows the software that we provide to him because we're keeping it on purpose simple, right? And once he outgrows it, he's going to start shopping around for more software. He's going to go and read some reviews about software, right? He's going to go and ask other IT pros about the software that they use. He's going to maybe even ask the guy that turned us down previously, what software are you using now? Because this, I'm running the Spiceworks thing, right? This is actually all by design, because all the ways that that guy finds the software that he wants is through Spiceworks as well. And all of that, how he connects to the brands and the products that he wants in the future that he eventually needs, those are all the brands that basically pay the bills here. And so, right, and so that's how we make money. And so we intentionally keep it simple and grow the business through having people sort of outgrow our product, if you will.
Interesting.
It's a crazy story, but I think it works.
Well, it's actually, it goes back to the interesting idea that sometimes you don't, like everybody has this idea that you have to change the world, and maybe sometimes you don't. You know, like, because like with the technology, they always think about like, you know, you have to come up with the next great algorithm. But what you're saying is it's more the business model is what you guys.
Yeah, I think the change the world stuff here is that we're doing it differently than anybody had thought about doing it before. Yeah, there's nothing technically. I've often said that what we're doing is kind of just putting together stuff that there's no magic to this. We're putting together a lot of things that you can do yourselves. Yeah. We're just trying to make it look good and make it really easy, so you don't have to know how to like go and dump the cam table on the switch and understand how the stuff will be wired together. I mean, some crazy stuff.
Let's see here. What would be a good job for a new programmer? That's one of the questions that always comes up, at least in the IT world, is, you know, what job should a new person go for? And I basically say whatever one they're offered, realistically, from our side.
Yes.
But for you guys, for programmers, you guys are a little cooler than we are.
I mean, at least right now, we'll see how long this bubble continues. It's definitely an employees market, not employers. It really is a personality match issue. It really depends on how you want to spend your time, what you want to learn.
Yeah.
I think a first job, it's, you know, you can always switch, right? You can try something out. If you wanted to find out what it's like to work in a big environment, big culture, there's plenty of those jobs. I personally favor small environments, small startups. If I feel like that you have the opportunity to work with more technologies. I mean, I've worked with very closely, and we talked about DevOps when we started this out, much closer to the hardware and much closer to the production environment. It kind of had more visibility into what was going on behind the scenes, if not working right next to actually, you know, messing with production servers before. So, I mean, I would hope a brand new person out of college would be getting right off the bat, but the idea that those, the business isn't abstracted too far, I think that that's a real benefit of a smaller company. And even the larger companies are starting to move to smaller internal models.
Yeah.
So the whole entrepreneur thing where you're basically, you know, small. But yeah, this basically the small teams within a larger company.
Yeah.
I think that there's more agility, and I think that so even in a large company, traditionally large company, you can still find pockets of rapid development, earlier adopter kind of things where you're not just stuck with one chunk of code that you're maintaining right out the bat. There's plenty of stuff out there. There's entertainment, there's games, there's systems level stuff. Really, there's no right answer for that.
So basically,
it's like saying, what do you want to eat for lunch?
Just like the smaller the company, though, the more likely you'll get your hands on different things.
I feel like that you'll have a faster, you'll mature faster in a smaller company.
So I guess that's one question too, is with this whole startup thing, because at least when you're dealing with the smaller startup world, I mean, it's hard to say you guys are a pretty big company at this point, but like the smaller startup world, the whole idea is everybody's supposed to go out there and start their own startup companies. Do you guys have any attrition? I mean, like, because obviously you're in a successful startup, so there must be a lot of smart people here going,
not just that, like location-wise, we're in I mean, Austin's a hotspot for startup incubators, a lot of VC. I mean, it's not Bay Area, but there's a lot of mobility.
But do you lose many people though?
Surprisingly not.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that is a little bit of the idea that there's a lot of ownership in what we do here. So even though that we're still, even though that we're crossed over 200 people, that there's still lots of, kind of going back to there's no specs and stuff like that. It's like a lot of people are doing what they think is right and getting their chance to make the decisions that are right for the business and stuff like that.
I would say the opposite. I would say we actually attract people who we offer some of the same mind state as small startups do. So I think that we have seen people that had done things on their own, who had experimented. I mean,
that's fair. Yeah.
I talked to the guy 2 days ago, just on a little startup, tried some things, learned a lot of lessons, and we benefit because he's learned lessons and matured, and he's coming in and being able to still bring the same mentality. Full product guy. He's not just somebody who wants to get behind code, wants to create, wants to think, and we'll foster that here too. So, yeah, kind of the opposite.
That's curious.
I want to go back to the question about what was the one you answered 2 questions ago? Getting something about the right job for starting off into.
Yeah.
I want to answer it slightly differently. I want to say. Don't think of doing test automation as a stigma, because I think a lot of developers think that like they need to go and be developers, and I think that especially in a hot job market, if you're having a hard time finding a job, there's lots of test automation jobs that are on the market as well, where you're going to go in there, you're still writing code, you're just sort of writing a different kind of code, and I think that there's a lot of experience that you would gain that would be applicable in the future of your career that would be all right. And so I would always recommend that to somebody as an option. I mean, it's perfectly fine.
I would say make sure that if you're doing that, you're going into a shop that's actually writing code, writing test automation frameworks.
Oh, yeah.
So the key word here is test automation, right? Not just test. There's plenty of, I clicked that, exactly.
So you listen to the full answer. Oh, okay, I'll test software. Question, Spiceworks, can you describe your marketing strategy? Well, we've talked about that other places.
Also, we're the developers. So.
I tell you, that's why. Let's see. In your career, you started learning and gaining skills. How did you solidify your skills? I guess that's one of the things is how do you prove especially for programmers, because everybody talks about whether or not you even need college anymore. So like, if you're the brainiac and like code's coming out of your ears, obviously, but like how do you prove you're cool enough to be a senior developer, or what? I mean, like what is?
I don't think that that's something that I mean, obviously there's intent on creating a product. And we talked about wins and losses a little bit.
Yeah.
These are things that you'll get inherent recognition from people around you over time. And even if you have a lot of losses, it's not about like just having a bunch of products that made money or a bunch of successful projects. Clearly, you learn more. I think you learn more from wins than losses, but you need both. I think that to take it up a notch, some of the characteristics you're looking for in a senior or a mature developer, I mean, in terms of capability, or we talk about passion, but that means to me, it doesn't mean you have to go to every user group, it doesn't mean you have to, every new framework you have to be on. But continuing to keep your ear to the ground and understand that this industry changes quickly. And this kind of goes back to, as you literally get older as a developer, not being, there's 9 to 5 straight out of college, so it's not really a function of age, but I think that that's key to success. It's not the only thing for sure, but keeping your eye on continuing industry changes, continuing development, I think that's really crucial.
So reread the question the way that he wrote it, if you would, because I think I have a slightly different answer.
Oh, okay. Well, how it actually comes is in your career you started learning and gaining skills. You aren't really an expert, but experienced. How did you solidify your skills to the expert level, self-study, learn on the job?
Okay, so...
Revise mine.
Oh, no,
it's easy. Work.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a little bit of an inference there that somehow expert skills advance your career, and that's the thing that I'm going to challenge. That it's not about how well we could write code, or maybe we don't write code. It's it's all about outcomes. You might be a pretty bad developer, quite honestly, but if you stick at it and you can actually produce a product, and not just product, and one of the things that we talk about in terms of the ownership and kind of responsibility in this company, it's like writing code is only half of it. Releasing software is something more. And so you finish writing the code, and it's like working with the test team to make sure that they know how to test it so that ultimately it actually makes it out there. If you're starting your own company, and it's not just getting it out there, but it's working with your users to understand where their challenges are. Maybe even before you have users, it's basically doing the marketing or working with the marketing team or whatever it is in order to try and gain that traction. There's a lot to actually producing outcomes, and like maybe less than half of it is actually writing the code itself. And so I think that's kind of an early mistake something that I wouldn't necessarily say is a mistake. It's just something that I didn't really understand in my career early on, was just that it's not done when you're done with the code. I mean, there's a lot more to it, and kind of owning something, shepherding it through the entire process. That's where you get to be leaders. It's not about how badass you are writing code.
I think that's huge, because I'm sure you've encountered these people before. I've met, name recognized industry experts and people who've written books, and people who I was excited to meet at user groups, conventions, or whatever. And we've actually had some people that I think around here that have been relatively local, well-known people. And some of those people can't produce product, right? And so to your point, they're experts, but not the people that we're over here, but I've encountered people that, after having talked to them, don't have a lot of real wins under the belt. They have a lot of knowledge, but it's not applied. And so, I mean, again, totally. Yeah, we can cover that.
We're throwing a rock in it.
Oh, this is always funny. See how you guys respond to that. I get this every once in a while. I've had a hard time learning a programming language. I lose motivation really quickly. Are there some activities that could keep up my motivation?
I go back to the answer about choose a tutorial or whatever that actually kind of like shows you outcomes, so you feel like you're actually having like successes or small wins or something, so you see that you're building something. I think it's hard to treat it academic and like kind of go through a book and do these like totally abstract exercises and stuff like that.
Yeah, same thing. Find something applied. I mean, if you're a gamer, start learning how to write a mod. If you're if you've got some job where you've got to run reports, go look at the SQL behind it. Find some application for it. And honestly, that's not always super fun, exciting. But I mean, it's much more practical, much more pragmatic. You'll get more mileage out of that than you will, like you said, reading something in the abstract.
How do you guys feel about hackathons? You love them? Okay.
Yeah, I don't value sleep a ton, so I kind of enjoy. Now, what I actually enjoy about the hackathon is it goes back to a part of our culture as well. And I know that we keep saying that sounds like we're a cult in here, but you get to see a lot of people's passion in something like a hackathon. It's their own ideas. It's them trying to produce something that they think is totally cool. We do a hackathon. We're going to try to do it twice a year now, where it's a week-long hackathon for Spiceworks devs. And but we also do one with the interns over the course of a weekend during the summertime. And it's cool just to see them produce stuff. And it's, again, not just the code. It's like when you are putting together sort of your presentation of what you built and trying to express what you think is important about it and why you did it. All of that stuff, I love it all. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, same. I was talking to a woman who's looking for PHP programs at South by, and apparently there's not a huge PHP market, but she was asking me, what are some ideas? What do you guys do to recruit? Give me some ideas. If you're a developer, if you pretend you're a PHP developer, how do I get on your radar? I said, well, I mean, if you, to me, a hackathon is a perfect, not necessarily like full-on recruiting tool, but you get to see in action, how does this person how do they play nicely with others? Do they think about the full product? Do they think about, can they think about usability? Can they think about how it's going to be used? So to me, there, as David said, you get a nice cross-section of the life cycle, like a little miniature snapshot of the life cycle of an application, or as a little development mini cycle.
So we're coming to about the end. We've got 2 minutes left. So I will ask the infamous question I've been asking everybody since I'm here in Austin, and since I came here the week after South by Southwest. So Snowden did his little speech or his little talk or whatever a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about how because of his releasing all the information to the world that has radicalized cryptographers. for you guys as actual programmers, because it's really easy for the pundits and the media and all that to talk about all these amazing things. It's because of Snowden it has changed the world. On the ground as programmers, especially programmers developing this kind of software, has that changed your day-to-day anything?
No.
Yes, right answer is no.
No, yeah.
I mean, I think that you have to be a responsible, ethical developer. And if you're using other people's data, you have to. I mean, I think that there's, industry guidelines, and I think there's the right thing to do. And sometimes it's above and beyond industry guidelines. So, I mean, I think that he's brought some of those topics into the mainstream conversation a little bit more.
Yeah.
When my dad's talking about data security, something's happening. So.
I guess if we had zero security practices before this whole thing started, maybe we would. But I mean, we were pretty well set up.
All right, so we switched off the plain old HTTP back to HTTP.
We started storing the passwords and encrypted.
Salting things.
No, I don't know. To me, the question smells a little bit like, these big decisions that happen in like DC. How does that affect you? Quite honestly, stuff doesn't affect the common person. So.
Okay, I'm just gonna. So we're coming to the end. So are there any? I always talk about like the golden nuggets of wisdom. These people are actually going out there. They're trying to get into the world. Is there like one parting thing that you would give them to say? If I was 18, if only I had known this thing.
Oh man, you catch me at a timely point. So I'm actually giving a talk tonight at UT, and so I have this fresh on my brain.
Yeah.
Completely relevant to your question. So I'll give you two bonus.
Yeah.
Number one is, and the title of my talk is basically sort of how school taught me wrong, and so and how Spiceworks sort of set me straight. And
yeah.
So the one category of these things is sort of on product development, like the actual process of writing code, etc. I think that school teaches you a lot of the right practices. We talked about that, extensibility, all these things. Until you actually have traction with your product, none of that stuff matters. Like, focus on getting the initial traction on your product. Don't entertain the idea of extensibility. Don't entertain the idea of sort of like edge cases and like what ifs and all this junk. Because if that future doesn't exist until you have traction with your initial product. And so I say, like, for that first product development thing, like, learn the phrase or adopt the phrase success problem. All those other things, like, if you're talking about a problem that you might have with your future users, that doesn't exist yet until you have current users, right? So those are all success problems. That's lesson one. Yeah. The second lesson, I think, goes back to something I said previously, where sort of like development for me in school sort of ended at how to build the product and not really how to get it out the door. So all the rest of the aspects of getting something out. So I'd say all these things are sort of like market traction, market deployment, whatever you want to call it. At some point, you finish the first version of your product. At that point, features are not your problem anymore. It's all about marketing. It's about getting awareness of your product. And I think there's a lot of unglamorous, what I call sort of like unglamorous sausage making to actually getting your product being used by users. And I remember at South by a couple of years ago, was it Steve Huffman, the guy that did Reddit, one of the Reddit guys, right? Okay. Anyway, he was doing this talk where he was talking about, like, in the early days that they had multiple accounts where they would go and post their own stuff in Reddit, right, in order to sort of get that flywheel to catch. And we did similar things like that in the very beginnings of Spiceworks. You're going there and sort of forcing conversation to happen. There's stuff like this that people don't really want to own up to the fact that they had to do it, because you sort of think as an engineer, I built it and therefore they will come. Yeah. And that's total BS, right? And so, so I think, like, sort of the second lesson is, like, be flexible and not idealistic. There's lots of people that think sort of the fastest path to from point A to point B is like this idea that I had for my application, I'm going to get it to point B or whatever it is, and they won't entertain ideas outside of what they thought their vision was. And I think that, it sort of goes back to the first one. There might not be a point B if you don't entertain. And I sort of say that as, like, the path from point A to B can actually include detours. That's okay, right? And you have to be flexible. And so, because I've met lots of people that are super idealistic about how their products are supposed to be used or adopted or whatever it is, and the fact is that the idealism might not get you there. And so, like, entertain the possibility of something else. Those are my two lessons.
I think that mine's kind of a subset of some of that. So for me, this is a little bit of this metaphor might not stick with everyone. If you ever played like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, you started to get good, you started to learn the combos, and pretty soon you figured out that 9-hit, 23-hit combo, and you're awesome at it. And then, you've got a win streak of 7, this is back when they actually had arcades.
Yeah.
And then you have some kid walk up, put a quarter in, and high punch, and kill you. And so, if you've watched, if you do MMA, watch GSP win a title fight via jab, there's a time and a place for simplicity, and there's a time and a place for complexity. And I think that as part of like a maturing career path, you learn, and the intermediate programmer knows how to do the combos and tries to apply them everything all the time. Right. And tries to come in, and everything's a new framework. Everything's got to be we're talking about idealism. Yeah. Everything has to be, extremely ideal, and you get caught up in that, and you forget this is a means, not the end. The technology is a means. The stack might not be perfect. Oh no, there's a new stack on the horizon. Somebody else wants a new programming language or whatever else. Yeah. So to me, the kind of Zen moment is realizing, oh, I can, for the first few levels, you know when to throw the jabs and when to throw the combos. You know when to use shell scripts. Is this really benefiting? Is this really what I'm trying to solve? Because developers, again, can get kind of lost in the woods on mundane tasks and finding new frameworks and writing, optimizing code that really is not crucial and integral to what you're really doing. Yeah. So I think that for me, a big nugget of that is at an early stage, keep your eye, again, kind of keep focused on what problem you're solving. Yeah. I'm not saying always, don't do the simplest thing that will possibly work all the time. There's a time and a place for complexity, but know when to recognize that.
That is the advice from the real programmers. So that was yet another, what the hell video? I'm looking at that one, right? Yeah, that was another daily blob. I'm getting tired. I've been here for it's the end of my 4th day. I'm not going to get out of here until 8 o'clock tonight. They have me, I'm going to be on their TV show. They have a Control-Alt-Tech show. So
you got to stick around for our Friday meeting at least.
Yeah, then the Friday meeting. So yeah, I'm going to have no brain by this weekend.
Where are you from?
Baltimore.
Baltimore?
Yeah, so.
Hang around for the Friday meeting.
So we will see you guys tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be talking to the guy who runs the community. Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about all the insanity of running a community. Because as you guys know, I have tried to run a community for you guys and gave up in frustration. So we will talk to a professional about how you professionally do it. And don't lose your mind. So we'll see you guys 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow.